Skirling bagpipes and sunny skies welcomed visitors to Bethlehem Works in late February. The occasion? Announcement of a memorandum of understanding between Bethlehem Steel and the Smithsonian Institution that could lead to establishment of a National Museum of Industrial History in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Hundreds of Lehigh Valley community leaders and Bethlehem employees gathered in a building that formerly produced alloy and tool steels, part of the Bethlehem Steel plant that helped build, defend, and transport America in the 19th and 20th centuries. Representatives of Bethlehem Steel, the Smithsonian, and federal, state, and local government were on hand for the celebration and official announcement of the Memorandum of Understanding.
I'm Hank Barnett. I'm delighted to welcome you here and to share with you the best-kept secret in the Lehigh Valley. I'm pleased to join with Secretary Michael Heyman in announcing to you that Bethlehem and the Smithsonian Institution have signed a Memorandum of Understanding to advance plans that could lead to a National Industrial Museum here in Bethlehem. It's an announcement that represents opportunity, it represents historical significance, and it represents cooperation in a public-private partnership. It's an opportunity for this and future generations to learn more about ourselves and our ancestors who helped build this country through their industrial genius. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate that the horizon of change need not limit our vision of what the future can be. And finally, it's an opportunity, of course, to help revitalize the energy of this community. It's a special day of historic significance in that it establishes a new relationship between the Smithsonian Institution and industrial America. It's the beginning of an opportunity to illustrate on this historic industrial site in full scale the genius of America's inventors and industrial leaders that led to the United States becoming and being the leader in the world's economy. The public-private partnership, which has brought us to this day, has shown what a spirit of cooperation can achieve and overcome if we're willing to accept the challenge of change by utilizing the synergies of a community's resources. It would be difficult indeed to overstate the potential that this new venture presents for the city of Bethlehem, the Lehigh Valley as a whole, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The museum would be independent, but would have an affiliation with the Smithsonian and rely upon it as the major source of industrial artifacts, the extent of that relationship, of course, to be developed over time. We've taken prompt actions to implement this agreement so that we can determine the museum's feasibility at a very early date. We've established a new not-for-profit museum corporation, the National Museum of Industrial History, which in accordance with our agreement will conduct the necessary studies concerning the museum's establishment. Steve Donchez, who has had such an active role in this for Bethlehem, will serve as the museum's initial president. To guide us, we've asked a number of the Lehigh Valley's leading citizens to serve on the Lehigh Valley Advisory Board of the museum. And this initial advisory board will include Dick Davidson, chairman of Union Pacific, Hap Wagner, CEO of Air Products, Bill Hecht, CEO of PP&L, Rich Gurin, CEO of Benny & Smith, John Howell, vice chairman of Summit Bancorp, Elmer Gates, former chairman of Fuller and now chairman of the Lehigh Valley Partnership, and I will, of course, join them. Equally important, we have asked the leaders of the Lehigh Valley's educational institutions to join us, and Dr. Peter Lyken is president of Lehigh University, and we acknowledge Peter and Lehigh's continuing support. Reverend Dr. Dan Gambit, president of Allentown College, Dr. Rusty Martin, president of Moravian College, Dr. Dorothy Blaney, president of Cedar Crest College, Mr. Arthur Rothkopf, president of Lafayette College, and Mr. Arthur Taylor, former president of CBS and now president of Muhlenberg College, all of whom will be joining us on our advisory board. Mayor Ken Smith, who's been an extraordinary supporter of our South Side plans, will also be an advisory director, as will the Reverend Dr. Michael Chubbuck, pastor of St. Cyril's and Methodius Church here on the South Side. Now that's solid Lehigh Valley support for the future of this project, and we thank you for joining with us in this effort. We've had the good fortune of finding early qualified creative advisors to help us develop the conceptual plans. But there really have been three developments which I believe should be reported to and shared with you. Three developments that have made this possible. Governor Ridge's Brownsfield's legislation, rezoning in the city, and the Smithsonian's desire to reach out to the communities of America. Now, from the beginning, in considering uses for property like this, the Brownsfield's initiative, which the governor campaigned on and passed during the first year, was absolutely fundamental. It signaled to us that a new way of thinking about old industrial sites was dawning in Pennsylvania, and we relied upon the Ridge administration's actions as we embarked on this project. Brownsfield's, as you know, encourages sellers and buyers to consider old industrial sites for new ventures. Indeed, if together we are successful with the museum and with the overall revitalization of the South Side, it is just possible that this effort will help set a national example of what can be done to similar industrial sites in a true public-private partnership by responsible corporations with community support under appropriate environmental laws. As to zoning, and I would say this in a very sincere and a respectful way, after an appropriate and a very thorough public debate of the issue, the city's approval of our rezoning request was another significant action that said in this community there is a strong desire to find a way to make things work in the overall public interest. And the third and vitally important reason is Secretary Heyman took over the Smithsonian in September of 1994, and he talked of his wish to share the Smithsonian collections with the cities and towns across America, knowing that we approached the Smithsonian about how we might establish a relationship that could be beneficial to many people and to both our organizations. We counseled with and are deeply appreciative to Senator Patrick Moynihan of New York for his early guidance. We're going to continue with vigor, you may be sure, this and other activities for the site in the months ahead. There will be much more. We're only at the beginning of what is a very promising public-private partnership, but we need all of your support, and we need your patience and your understanding. But enough. I would like you to hear now from the other speakers. First, Mr. Michael Heyman, Secretary of the Smithsonian. It's his vision of community outreach that makes our developing relationship possible. We're grateful for his vision and for his interest in our community.
If this works, and I expect it will, this will be our first major implementation of this new way for the Smithsonian to act. I must say that in entering these grounds today, I was overwhelmed by the size, both of the job, but also of the opportunity. But I think what makes me the most optimistic that this will in fact occur is to look at all of you in this room. I'm absolutely astounded at how many people have shown up, the eagerness that is evidenced by your presence, the gala sense in this tent with wonderful band music. I think we're really launching something that's going to work. It'll be very important for Bethlehem, but it will be similarly important for the Smithsonian. Thank you.
For today, I believe with this memorandum of understanding, we break new ground with the promise of a wonderful alliance between our nation's treasure trove, the Smithsonian Institution and Pennsylvania's own Bethlehem Steel. When you close your eyes, you can almost see this building full of life. You can almost smell the energy in the air, hear the voices not only of our forebears in a general sense, but probably the fathers and grandfathers of many of the men and women who are with us today in this very room. Your family and your community have much invested in this magnificent facility. And we want to share that with the rest of the world for all time to come. Yes, when you think about it, there is no better place to create a memorial to America's industrial past than a place that still vibrates with fond memories of that era. I believe the appropriate forum is Pennsylvania, and everyone in this room believes the appropriate forum is Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And with the promise of this new industrial museum, it will be a bright future indeed for this community, for this region, and for the Commonwealth. And let me just simply say to you, Mr. Heyman, given the novelty and the excitement of this first venture that's been a dream of yours on behalf of 12 million Pennsylvanians, we welcome you to Pennsylvania. There's no better place to have a national museum honoring the commitment, courage, and the innovation of our industrial heritage in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we thank you, Hank Barnett, for your vision to help get it sited here in Bethlehem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I was just up here talking, and I said, you know, I still feel a little uncomfortable being here in the sense that Hank called me and told me about this a couple months ago, and I said, well, what can I do to help? He said, well, we'll let you know. And I ran into him again, and I said, is there anything I can do to help you on this? He said, well, we'll let you know. And here I am, and I haven't done anything to help. And I mentioned that, and then Ken Smith said, well, we haven't gotten to asking for the money yet. So I hope to be back here after I have actually done something to help, and I look forward to that day when we can make that all happen. Thank you, and God bless.
I've had many enjoyable experiences as mayor for the last 10 years, but participating in today's announcement tops them all because of the value that it brings to the entire community, indeed to the entire Lehigh Valley and to the Commonwealth, not just for today, but for generations to come. The Smithsonian, recognized world over as the museum, is of course in a class of its own. Through the exhibition of its priceless treasures, it will provide us and our successors a most wonderful and matchless opportunity to learn about this country's industrial processes and how our forefathers discovered, tested, developed, and perfected processes and products that fueled the growth of the United States and served the world. To anyone who has visited the mall in Washington and spent an afternoon wandering through the collections on display, this venture, within literal reach of tens of millions of people in this part of the country, will be recognized as a golden opportunity for many people who otherwise, simply because of distance, would have been denied the experience.
Secretary Heyman, when you were at the microphone just a couple of moments ago, you expressed appreciative surprise at the number of folks that we have here. There's a reason for that. What you need to understand is that for the men and women who for over a century produced steel here in Bethlehem, it wasn't a job, it was a very special way of life. For many, many decades, men and women who were Slovak and Windish, German and Irish, Italian and Puerto Rican, came through that main gate and worked as hard as human beings could to make a contribution to our community and ultimately our country. We owe those men and women so much. Their names are now lost to history, but what they did here can never be forgotten. If we cannot produce steel on this site any longer, we can at least honor the memory of those who once did. That is the promise of today's announcement. Thank you.
This announcement
is the result of cooperation between business and government. The brave steps taken in less than 1 year by Bethlehem Steel Corporation officials, Bethlehem City Administration, and Bethlehem City Council. Mr. Barnett, Bethlehem Steel, we in Bethlehem thank you very much.
Okay, Michael Fuller.
Serving eastern Pennsylvania and western New Jersey. This is Channel 69 News at 7.
Big news at Bethlehem Steel as it teams up with the Smithsonian Institution. Good evening. Major plans unveiled at Steel's Southside plant this afternoon, plans that will bring a National Museum of Industrial History to this area. Okay, Nerissa, thanks very much. In other news, Bethlehem Steel has unveiled plans to build a national museum on the site of its old Southside plant. The Smithsonian Institution plans to collaborate with the steelmaker to develop the project. Janet Vassell was on the site this afternoon with a big crowd of other people, I guess, as well, Janet, and she's got the latest details.
There were hundreds of dignitaries that came out, Rob, to hear this announcement, and apparently they liked what they heard. They heard Governor Ridge and the head of Bethlehem Steel and the head of the Smithsonian outline a vision for the site to become a national museum of industrial history.
The proposed museum will be developed in 3 existing buildings that once produced alloy and tool steels. It will be part of the Bethlehem Works redevelopment project, a family entertainment and education complex located on the 160 acres of the former steel plant. Organizers see it as a way to reclaim part of the shut-down plant, to create jobs, add to the area's tourist attractions, and to honor the past.
We stand here inside this amazing structure, amazing steel structure, this important reminder of our industrious past, to celebrate, I think, the promise of an industrious future, a future full of innovation, partnership, and discovery.
The Steel Museum won't be a branch of the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian will not run or pay for it, but it will loan hundreds of industrial artifacts for display.
And the industrial artifacts of the Smithsonian can really be combined in a relationship that will benefit all those interested in industrial history in a way that until now has simply not been possible.
Barnett says the project is at a pre-development stage with a lot of challenges ahead.
Apparently, he's put together a good team. Bethlehem Steel has created a new not-for-profit museum corporation to conduct a feasibility study. It'll raise the money, and eventually it will run the museum. They say this is a first step, but they will make a final decision about this whole project within a year.
It's going to be busy on the south side.
Oh, yes.
Thanks a lot, Janet.
But leading the news tonight, the history of Bethlehem Steel will be preserved and passed on to many generations, thanks to a collaboration between the Steel and the Smithsonian Institution. An industrial history museum will be housed in several of the old steel buildings on the south side of Bethlehem. In town for today's big announcement was Governor Tom Ridge and Smithsonian officials.
We stand here inside this amazing structure, amazing steel structure, this important reminder of our industrious past, to celebrate, I think, the promise of an industrious future, a future full of innovation, partnership, and discovery.
But I think what makes me the most optimistic that this will in fact occur is to look at all of you in this room. I'm absolutely astounded at how many people have shown up, the eagerness that is evidenced by your presence, the gala sense in this tent with wonderful band music. I think we're really launching something that's going to work. It'll be very important for Bethlehem, but it will be similarly important for the Smithsonian. Thank you.
The agreement is for the Smithsonian Institution to loan hundreds of artifacts to help Pennsylvania establish this industrial history museum. Bethlehem Steel President Hank Barnett says possibly in the future, the Industrial Museum could become part of the Smithsonian.
Bethlehem Steel would, of course, make available the property, the land, and the buildings to the museum, and we will enthusiastically support its activities.
This is the Smithsonian's first agreement to have collections housed outside of Washington, D.C.
It has long been a symbol of this country's glorious industrial past, but soon a section of the giant Bethlehem steel mill may become a national museum. Action News reporter David Murphy was in the Lehigh Valley today.
Bethlehem, in the heart of the Lehigh Valley, is known for its quiet streets, Lehigh University, and the steady decline of its most famous employer, Bethlehem Steel. Today, company officials and lawmakers unveiled plans to turn part of the mammoth old steel mill into the National Museum of Industrial History. U.S. Senator Rick Santorum and Governor Tom Ridge were among those here trumpeting the idea.
When you think about it, there is no better place to create a memorial to America's industrial past.
Indeed, the Bethlehem Steel Works once employed 14,000 people and churned out the raw material for everything from the nation's railroads and skyscrapers to battleships. Steel company officials say a museum here wouldn't be just any museum, partly because of the location inside 3 enormous steelworks buildings, but also because of the partnership they've struck up. America's National Museum, the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., has chosen Bethlehem as the first in a series of places it wants to send some of its millions of artifacts to make them more accessible. Under the plan, this locomotive, among other items, would come north. Here in Bethlehem, many local residents, like Tom Hurl, like the plan.
Anything they can do to help the south side, bring people into the area, to help revitalize the area, will be a great benefit to the town.
So do some of the steel workers still on the company payroll.
Something useful for the plant, you know, so to make use of this land is good.
The plan must still survive a feasibility study, and a public-private financing package is still being worked out. Officials don't yet know how much admission might be or how many visitors they'll need to keep the museum viable. But the Smithsonian partnership is big. Supporters say the museum could be breathing life into these vacant historic buildings within about 3 years. In Bethlehem, David Murphy, Channel 6 Action News.
Pennsylvania is to become the home of the National Museum of Industrial History. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to be exact. The Smithsonian Institute is lending hundreds of objects to the new museum, which will be housed in a vacant steel mill in Bethlehem. Bethlehem Steel is donating the building and setting up a non-profit corporation to build and operate that museum. The $60 million project is the first partnership of its kind for the Smithsonian.
Who doesn't enjoy a trip to the Smithsonian to taste the history of America?
But soon you won't have to travel to Washington to see some of the old artifacts. This is the 1875 Otis elevator, and it's one of several objects the Smithsonian will loan to Bethlehem Steel to display in the new Museum of our Industrial History. Governor Tom Ridge says the display of the old steel machines of our past celebrates the promise of an industrial future.
And with today's agreement, together we move forward, and together we look toward giving the respect and deference and honor to those grandparents, those industrial pioneers, by inviting the world to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to explore our industrial roots.
If things work out well with this agreement, the museum could get hundreds more artifacts from the Smithsonian.